This is a quick overview of some of the SaaS marketing careers that are out there. This isn't based on any sort of solid research or statistics. This is based on my own subjective experience working with SaaS companies for many years in Silicon Valley and elsewhere. So, a few things that I want you to consider before you start getting into specific job titles is to start with, think about the company size, because often the company size is going to determine more about what you're doing as a SaaS marketer than any other factor. So even though you might have a specific job title, like product marketing manager, for example, what you're going to be doing and what you should be doing is going to be dictated more by the size than the actual function. So we have different size companies. Now you have bootstrap companies that generally don't have a lot of money. So you're probably not going to get paid very well. Maybe you'll get some equity. So there's higher risk associated with those types of companies. You have pre-seed, they have pre-seed funding, seed funding, Series A, Series B, Series C, Series E, Series D. And then you have the Goliaths, which are the companies that have gone public, and the Fortune 500, super large companies. Now, when you're in a small company, generally speaking, your role as a marketer is as a generalist. You're going to have to do everything. The copywriting, the advertising execution. You're going to be focused a lot on actually getting performance yourself. So it's very easy to attribute your success to your inputs. And that can be very rewarding, but it can also mean that there's a lot of responsibility and pressure on you. Depending on what kind of environment you prefer, you need to determine what size company you want to be at. The other thing that's very important when you're in a small company is speed. Getting sales quickly, acquiring customers fast, executing and learning. That agile mindset is very, very important. Now, this starts to reverse when you're in a large company. What starts to change is you take on a very specialized role. You only do product marketing. You only do brand marketing. You only do content marketing. So your competence becomes very narrow, and there's less emphasis on your individual performance and more emphasis on politics. So it's not how well you're able to do something, it's how well you're able to navigate the political landscape to be able to get other people to do what you need to get done. So those relationships start to matter more, and what that also means is that speed matters less. It's more about relationship management. It's more about doing things using the proper process. It's about being more process driven to avoid things like lawsuits, making sure things get reviewed by the legal team. So you have to think about your personality and what kind of environment you would prefer. If you're a very people-oriented person and you want to be able to take all your holidays off to enjoy time by yourself and you're process driven, you might be happier in a larger company. Now, the good thing with the SaaS industry is that you can make a ton of money in small startups or in large companies. Now, generally, we tend to think that people are paid better in larger companies. To some extent, that's true. But because of venture capital and the fact that there's so much venture capital flooding into SaaS companies, you can make substantial amounts of money. And not only that, but you also have the huge upside of having equity in a company that could explode. I'm not saying you should bank on that, but that's something to factor in. Whereas the equity that you get in something like a Google is not going to be as substantial. And sometimes companies that are big brand names can also afford to pay you less because they know that you want to work there for the brand name, to have that brand name on your resume. I'm not saying that you're not going to be paid well when you work at a Google or a Facebook, but I'm just saying that sometimes companies acknowledge that people are going to work there anyways, so they don't necessarily have to pay the rate that they would at a lesser known firm. Now, in terms of pay, I would say an exception to this would be like a bootstrap company. So if a company hasn't gotten their Series A, they probably don't have a ton of money to pay you. So working at a bootstrap business, you're really probably banking on the equity, or you're just banking on the fact that you don't have a lot of experience and you need to get experience somewhere, and starting with bootstrap is just where you're going to start. But you can pretty much make money at companies that are tiny or super large. So I wouldn't let the monetization of your job factor in so much as where do you think you belong in terms of your personality? Okay, another big factor is, are you going to be in B2B or B2C? So most SaaS companies are probably B2B. The reason is that to be successful in the consumer market, you generally need large economies of scale to be able to serve customers profitably, because customers tend to pay less per user, per customer. So tons of these business-to-business SaaS companies are going to be hiring people in marketing. Now, one thing to consider is that business-to-business companies tend to be sales-led, whereas consumer companies tend to be marketing-led. And if feeding the sales pipeline is something that excites you and you enjoy that, then you're probably going to be quite comfortable in a B2B environment. Whereas if you're more tilting towards kind of the branding and building large consumer brands, and you're okay with perhaps working in a larger company, then you might want to consider the business to consumer space. The other thing you need to factor in before you look at specific job titles isn't just whether it's a large company or a small company, isn't whether it's B2C or B2B, but also whether you want to work in-house or out-house. So do you want to actually work for Google or for some SaaS startup? Or do you want to be an external agent, consultant, copywriter who helps those companies or the founders of those SaaS companies? Because that's going to determine a bit about what kind of role you're going to play. So if you're an agency side, you're probably going to focus a bit more on the advertising type of thing, the marketing communications, or sometimes the market research. When you're internal, you're going to be probably a bit more focused on things like strategy and be closer to the product and the product managers. Another thing to consider is seniority. So choosing a job function is important, but the role that you're going to play is going to be determined by how long you stick to that function. So for example, as you get more senior, you might be more focused on strategy. You might be more focused on people management, and you might become more of a generalist. So you're covering everything within that function. So there's kind of that vertical change in functionality that is agnostic to what specific area of SaaS marketing you're in. So let's do a bit of an overview of what these different roles are. And one thing to keep in mind is that these roles basically don't exist until you reach certain company sizes in a lot of cases. So that's going to determine a lot of the times whether you enjoy that job, less what the job title is and more just, oh, it only exists in large companies. So let's walk through what some of these are. There is general marketing, which is basically what you're going to be doing when you're at a small company. You have to do everything. And there tends to be a focus here on marketing communications. So things like writing the copy for the website, coming up with the design and copywriting for an advertisement, doing the emails, doing all sorts of things with a tilt towards marketing communications and less on the strategic tilting towards product management side. Now we have demand generation. So in business-to-business companies, when you're small and mid-sized, the primary function of marketing tends to be filling the sales pipeline. So that means generating leads, nurturing leads, making sure that sales has new potential customers to talk to who are highly likely to buy your product within the next couple of quarters in most cases. That's what demand generation is. It's kind of focusing on the bottom of the funnel. Let's get these low-hanging fruit. Let's get them talking to sales and generate impact immediately. On the consumer side, you have what you call performance marketing, which is basically the same thing as demand generation, but for consumers. So this is where you're doing things like running Google ads to get people to try your product. And then when they're done trying it out, you're converting them into paying customers. Now, with performance marketing, often you're focused on actually getting them to become paying customers because that's how consumer marketing works. And consumer marketing is more marketing-led and sales-led. Whereas in demand generation, you're not actually closing the deal in most cases. What you're doing is you're teeing up the salesperson to close the deal. Now, I mean, there are exceptions here. There is self-serve SaaS and business to business, where the marketers are the ones actually getting the deal. But by and large, you're feeding the sales pipeline. Okay, now we have product marketing. So product marketing starts to emerge typically when companies are mid-sized, because until that stage, you don't have enough product managers and salespeople to justify a product marketing role, because the product marketing role helps the salespeople and helps the product managers by providing strategic guidance on the target market, the value proposition. They also provide sales enablement, so tools, content, etc., that empowers the salespeople to do a better job. So you become a multiplier, and you also become very cross-functional in this role. So you're working with the product managers, you're coordinating the marketing specialists. So you need a certain economy of scale in order for a true product marketing manager to exist. So that happens in mid-sized companies. Also, in small companies, there's a lot of growth hacking, there's a lot of agile kind of testing and shifting course a lot. But when you get mid-sized, things start to slow down a bit, and you need to think more methodically, more strategic. And that's where the product marketing manager comes in. Now, there's also the growth marketing manager, who tends to be the person focused on conversion rate optimization. How do we extract more value out of existing traffic that are coming to our product, that are coming to our website? And again, this role truly exists when you start to get to the mid-size, because optimizing your conversions when you're tiny is just inconsequential, because you don't have enough users or enough data to even work with. Now, I want to highlight something, which is that these titles change, their meaning changes, and also when small companies start using terms, they use them very differently from what they originally were. So a product marketing manager in a small company is not doing product marketing. What they're doing is general marketing. And a growth marketing manager at a small company is not doing what I would call growth marketing. Really what they're doing is growth hacking. Because growth marketing is more around conversion and optimization, but you don't really have much to optimize when you're tiny. So growth hacker is something that would exist in a small company. So here what you're doing is you're doing a lot of agile experimentation, you're doing bold bets, you're seeing if you can break the rules a bit. Sometimes growth hackers have a product background where they're thinking about integrations in the product itself. So there's like growth product managers, there's also growth hackers on the marketing side. Now, when you start to get to the high end of the mid-sized companies, this is where brand marketing generally comes into play. And what you're doing here is you're focused less on individual products, use cases, individual features. What you become more interested in brand marketing is promoting the brand that is the umbrella for all of the products. And this is where the marketing starts to look a lot more like the creative advertising that you see from external agencies. So it's more like the conventional idea that people have when they think marketing. They think of advertising that's kind of emotional and witty and humorous and creative, a bit more kind of artistic. But there's the quantitative element of measuring things like brand awareness, purchase intent, brand perception. And this role is also, there's a lot of project management involved here, because you're coordinating timelines of when assets go out in different countries, you're coordinating schedules, you're working with external agencies, that sort of thing. Now we have marketing operations, which can be very technical. So you're dealing with a lot of marketing automation, you're dealing with the handoff that happens to sales, you're dealing with the CRM, and how when a lead gets generated, how does it get handed to sales team? Is there a round robin assignment, that sort of stuff? So I think of it as kind of almost a marketing tech role. And again, I'm generalizing based on my own limited experience. I'm sure these jobs are going to take on different meanings depending on where you apply. Now we have content marketing. Content marketing tends to be more important in mid-sized companies, although I would say small companies often focus on it to their own detriment. But content marketing is writing blog posts, coming out with your own webinar, educational series, podcasts, this type of journalistic type behavior. It's kind of like media, which kind of segues into another field that is to a large extent separate from marketing, and that is communications and PR. So this is working with publications and making sure you're getting published there. You're going to be focusing on things like, can you get speaking engagements for the CEO? A field of marketing that I have somewhat limited direct experience with. So usually, as a marketer, I would work with somebody who is an expert in PR or communications when we're doing something like a major product launch. Product launch usually being led by the product marketing manager by coordinating with all of these other people. So those are just some of the roles. There are more. Sometimes people will have dedicated roles, for example, for digital marketing. But I would say to a large extent, it's going to be covered by somebody in demand generation or performance marketing. But as you get really, really large, you start to get very narrow specialized roles. So for example, there might be somebody dedicated just to the website and website marketing. The other thing to keep in mind is that these are mostly internal roles, but they can be externalized. And there are certain even more specialized roles that are generally externalized to external agencies, consultants, contractors. And that might be something like a copywriter, somebody that only does copywriting. Generally, something like that wouldn't exist in a SaaS company. You wouldn't have somebody just doing copywriting. But what you might do is work with an agency or a freelancer that does that. Similarly, like you might have web designers. If your company's not big enough to have an internal web designer, you'll probably rely on an external agency, and that agency may specialize in just doing websites for the SaaS industry.